I will introduce myself first. Eric Sbar from Mind Research. I've been with our nonprofit for 17 years now. Prior to that, I was actually a musician and music educator, which is why you see some instruments behind me. But as a musician, one of my many part-time jobs was teaching math. So I always taught math. In high school, I tutored math. In college, I actually taught math. And even as a professional musician, I always taught math. So that's what drew me to Mind. And we're going to talk a little bit more about our whys. And then at Mind for the last 17 years, I've had a lot of different roles, training teachers, supporting schools, and then training people internally and doing national presentations, and also explaining what we do to partner school districts and explaining our neuroscience research. So a lot of different things. So that's me in a nutshell. So Doc, you want to take a minute?
Yeah, I'm Doc Roth. I'm the principal right now at Meadow Valley Middle School in the middle of nowhere. It's actually closer to Area 51 than any major city. But I love it. I love not having red lights and traffic jams. It is kind of a bummer that all we have is a Family Dollar, but that's our Walmart. I started off this career as a first grade teacher, a 6'2" tall first grade teacher looking down at my students, and my principal brought me through a training called Mathematics Their Way. It set a course for me to fall in love with math, and I ended up being a instructional coach in mathematics and science and gifted and talented education. Ended up being an assistant principal and a principal now in every school I've gone to. The questions of how to tackle this content area, which I think is as unique as going to a country like maybe Japan, where you have to do some cross-cultural training before you jump into just flying to Japan. You want to learn a little bit about what high context versus low context cultures are. That's another subject. In mathematics, I find that every school that I've been at has had deficits. And so I love the idea of coming up with ways to tackle them. So my career has led me through math coaching and improving at least 2 schools in their performances in math.
Great. So as I mentioned, so we're going to share a little bit about our why. We're going to talk about the how at several different school examples. Then we're going to try to distill things down a little bit for you. And all of this can be a little bit conversational because we are allowing time for Q&A at the end. So that's the structure of it. So I think for this initial part, I'm going to stop sharing my screen just so you can see Doc and myself better as we're talking. So hopefully that works. So why don't we start with a little bit of our personal why we're involved in this work and bringing ST Math to schools. And Doc, you already kind of started, so I would say run with.
The first thing I'm going to say is I'm excited to be here with you guys because I feel like that same feeling you walk into when you go to your favorite amusement park, that initial morning rush. I hope you guys are going to get that when you start learning about this program. My why has to deal with a couple of things. Number one, I don't like the state of mathematics instruction in our nation. I don't like the way it feels. I don't like the way I hear people talk about math. I don't like when people say, I'm not good at math. I don't like the vibe oftentimes. I think the classrooms, the pedagogy we use, the methods can be better. My why, in every building that I said that I've been to, there's always been a gap between race, between socioeconomic status. There's always been mathematical gaps. And that equity is really important it's a big why for me. So one of my heroes is Maria from The Sound of Music. And I believe that she's a great model for pulling excellence into a situation. Those kids ended up performing on this movie, if you haven't seen it, in front of great audiences, but they didn't start off that way. But she wasn't conventional. So when I look at coming into a building to help it improve, I try to pull out multiple strategies. ST Math is one little piece of a plan that I put into place when I'm in buildings. I look at the PLC models and how strong and tight they are, and if teachers have the ability to share their expertise in our building, or do they have voice? I look for things like our master schedule and the timing that we've provided for teachers to produce such great results. I look at things like pedagogy and how we're doing in terms of planning our beginning, middle, and ends. There's a lot of strategies, but ST Math as a part of my plan is usually around the idea that we've taught math a lot of times through an auditory processing system. We've used teacher lecture systems. We've used memorization systems, but there's very few things that have been for brains that are visual and for brains that think differently. There's not been a lot of stuff out there. And so when I first got into ST Math, I wanted to see what a visual approach can do. So my why is really to close any kind of achievement gaps. Number two, to help kids fall in love with mathematics and it not be that one subject that everybody says, I'm not good at math. I hate that. So those are my whys. And I'll turn it over to Eric for his whys.
Sure. Thanks, Doc. And I think there's a lot of overlap, honestly. So for me, what drew me to mind originally and this work, 17 years ago, was because I could see, as soon as I saw this approach with the games and the visuals and the ability to reduce anxiety, I mean, that's huge for me. That's what drew me in. So I could see that all the kids that I worked with, these games, even back then, which was a much earlier version of the program, I was like, everybody needs this. I totally get it. That was just obvious to me. And then once I came aboard, the math anxiety thing, it's passed from parent to child. It's passed from teacher to student. Twana talked about it this morning. I mean, it may be like, it's a massive cultural shift we're trying to achieve. And so what keeps me moving, it is not uncommon that I will be sitting around, even talking to a group of superintendents, many of whom will say, I'm not a math person. And that's where we're at. You're the instructional leader for the whole system, and you're willing to say that out loud. Even if you believed it, like that'd be one thing, but like it's actually culturally acceptable for you to say it. So we have to keep working, and that kind of work really excites me. And when we talk to, and I know Doc has expressed this same thing. I mean, I talked to a district earlier.
Pregúntale a ella que si no tienen
So maybe Lisa, I don't know if you have the ability. Oh, I can mute them actually, I think. Okay. So I talked to a district this morning where they're dealing with, 20% of the kids at certain grade levels being proficient, and testing is one whole separate issue. But that, any way you count it, that's not acceptable. We're reaching 20% of the kids. So it's work. That's what keeps me here. Okay. So think about, and thank you, Aaron, for sharing your camera too. We appreciate it. I see you. So feel free to chime in with additional questions. So we're going to move on from our why to some of the how. So we're going to talk about these 3 different schools that Doc has been at. And what's cool is Doc was a principal in Colorado Springs, and I was the representative from Mind working with Colorado Springs to help bring in ST Math. And this is a long time ago, maybe, I don't know, 12 years
1944.
ago. Yeah, exactly. And so he has one experience as a principal, and I had one experience as sort of an outsider to the district, but somebody who was closely involved. And we also have data because it's 12 years later, and we published this data on our website. So a lot of exciting things to share. So Doc, I'd like you to start. What was your initial experience being there?
So Darth Vader landed at my school, came out with all the stormtroopers and said, "You will teach ST Math." And then they about to do the finger thing on my neck, and I was like, okay. Really, truly, this is what happened. I had no idea what the heck an S and a T were doing in front of the word math. My director of curriculum is sitting in my office, and when you're in a large district and the director of curriculum is in your office, you get, your eyebrows are like this, and you're like taking notes. And she's like, we bought this program, and your school is not using it up to our expectations, and that needs to change. And I was just like, okay. So my initial experience was, we are already doing a lot of action steps to improve mathematics. Why are you giving me something else to put on our plate? They don't have any more time, and can you give me another hour in the day? Then I can pull it off. And I was like, not very happy at first. Okay, skeptic right here. I had the card. I was a member. But I'm not always like, my mama taught me, you never know unless you ask. So I decided that I was going to make a couple of demands. And I said, all right, if we're going to jump on this, I need you to give me t-shirts for every kid that gets to 100%. And I want to make it something that they like. If they can get to 100%, they're getting a cool t-shirt with the GG penguin on it. And so she said, I can do that. So I felt like I walked away with a win-win. And then when I was, and so my teachers were basically told, district said, we got to do this. And then when I walked around and I saw how kids were engaging and thinking, and how it was empowering them to go as fast as they want. It was empowering them to, when they had questions, it supported, like a video game. When you lose a life, you get to try again. Okay, don't jump off the cliff this time, climb down the vine. You know, like in math, they were able to do that same kind of their world. So part of what I was going to say earlier is, if we could sit in the first grade chair for just a few minutes and try to think about what it would be like to have a first grade brain in the first grade chair in my first grade math class, and just sit and just really try to put yourself back. It's not easy for us adults, but try to put ourselves back to being a kid and thinking about what this experience is like from the beginning of the class, middle of the class, end of the class. As a kid, what's my experience like? I felt like ST Math, it won me over, because I saw kids who might have hit a barrier if they couldn't understand a teacher's pedagogy or way, if they couldn't understand a textbook. I remember in third grade, I was so lost when I was a third grader. What do you mean there's a little, why did they put the period in the math words? Why is there this, it's a decimal point, but why is there like a period in this? And then what is this line doing? And there's numbers on top of them. I was so lost in third grade. But this program showed me, it took the adult factor out and it brought it down to a kid way of seeing math. And I felt like, to me, it won me over. So that was experience one, and I'm gonna pause and let Eric jump in on D11.
Yeah, well, I want to ask you some follow-up questions.
Okay.
So how long did it take you? So you're skeptic, they're coming in and telling you, and you're like, hey, I've got stuff going on. I'm already working on math. Don't give me new stuff to do. How long did it take you to transition to being somebody who was like, hey, this is pretty cool. I actually see the value of this. How long did that take?
I think the initial time I saw a kid interacting, I think that started my process. It wasn't even something that took me time. Like, I was a whole language teacher and they brought in everyone teach dyslexic, phonics. Like, it was really intense. It took me a while to convert, and then I thought, hey, phonics is important. Okay, I learned. But in this case, it was probably immediate. I mean, like, when I started watching kids work through it, I think it wasn't long at all. It was probably a couple weeks.
Okay. So talk to us about your teachers, because they all,
yes.
I'm sure they did not all convert right away.
So no. So
what did you do specifically? Like, what were some of the things you did with them?
So, change management, you got your fast pioneers, and then you got those who are like anchors holding everything back. And every school has this, and I had this. And you can tell, because as administrator, mistakes I've made. We get an email report that says Mrs. Crabtree had 0 minutes. Mrs. McGillicuddy had 200 minutes. And I would just forward this email off to staff. I'd get it in and I'd forward it off. So they were talking by the water cooler. Man, did you see Miss Crabtree? And I got feedback like, that embarrassed me. And I was like, I was just being transparent. But anyway, that's a mistake. So there's a couple of things that happened. The teachers that saw their students beginning to embrace math differently, they bought in, and I didn't have to do anything. They scheduled their times, they got their kids on it. Some of the teachers were just like, he's not peeking in my room today, I'm not doing it. So I had a couple strategies I used. One of them was we needed to do some master schedule shifting because there were some things going on. I'll tell you that later if you ever want to email me. And so I had the opportunity to create a new specials, and I created one called the personalized learning block. And in that one, we just focused in on our target area that year, which was math. And so I hired a really flexible, awesome teacher. She ended up creating personalized learning in mathematics. That was the flavor of personalized learning block in her specials class. So the kids went to art, music, PE, and personalized learning block. When they went to her class, they had a choice menu based on standards that specific kid needed. And ST Math was a foundational piece of their time with her. I think she did it in a rotation where they had an ST Math station, then they had a menu station, and they had other things. But that was one of my ways to overcome the resistors, because I felt it was too important for kids. And in an elementary setting, you have students with their teacher all day. And so if you had a teacher that resisted it, they weren't going to get ST Math. I'm not a micromanaging leader, and so I found a way around it by building a systemic approach, which was a specialist class. I really felt it helped.
Great. So I hope you guys can hear me. I dropped out for a second on my end, but hopefully I'm back. Okay. So my experience, very briefly, I was very impressed with Colorado Springs. It's a large system, and so I appreciate that from the principal's point of view. It felt like it came down from the top, but I think from our point of view, we appreciated that it was done systemically. They had like a press night. They invited local media. They did have T-shirts. They literally put signs around the district saying Gigi is coming. They did all these things to build excitement before anybody even knew what it was. And then they rolled it out system-wide at one time, and they did it very effectively. And I could see where there might have been resistance, but I'm glad in your case, Doc, that things started to change quickly. That's one way of implementing, and that's maybe not always the best way. But I did want to share very quickly. I'm going to share my screen. So we have the data, and I want you guys to know, is it sharing?
Yes.
You're seeing Colorado data?
Colorado ST Math.
Okay,
Advantage.
that's weird. So it's not giving me a box. All right. So, I mean, this is all on our website. I didn't have to dig for this. So this is the 1 year analysis. So the treatment group versus, actually, the first year, this is analysis showing all schools, no matter how they implemented, did the district go up versus the state? And they had some good initial. Then now we did the effect on the treatment group. So if the grade levels actually used it, did they grow versus similar matched groups in the state? And was like, okay, that's on our website. And then this is on our website too. And I'm going to see if I can make it a little bigger. Maybe you can. Yes. Okay.
There you go.
So this doesn't initially look so hot because you're like the ST Math percentile stayed about flat, and the control group, now we're talking bigger groups. And this is after 5 years. But here's what happened. They shifted yardsticks. They shifted assessments from one assessment to the park assessment. So the whole state went down. So the fact that the kids who used ST Math went down way less was actually a win. So they outgrew the similar students by 7.3 percentile points. So the work you did, and Doc's school is part of this study, which is awesome. All 3 testing grades. So not only you saw what worked, you saw you heard a little bit about some of the challenges and what he did about them, and then you get to see results. So it's kind of cool to come back 12 years later and see the whole thing. All right, then we're going to talk briefly about your second school you brought it into, which is more rural, but not as remote as you are now, right? But also in Colorado. So why don't you talk a little bit about bringing it into Falcon and how that worked?
So I was introduced as the principal for Falcon Elementary School Technology. And I have a really long experience with elementary school. So you'll see that come out in my little playful way of interacting. I can also do the interview professional talk too, but I'm going to be myself. So I walk in and I know about change management, and there's a lot of fear when you're a new principal that, oh, he's going to come in and change everything. So I didn't want to come in and say, everybody, Darth Vader, I'm going to do to you what happened to me, and you're going to all do ST math. What I did this time was I found a person, I selected the interventionist teacher. And I said, there's this program that I really think works. Would you be willing to try it? I want to, ask you, and you can say no. But if you try it, I want your honest feedback as to if you see it's helping. And the reason I selected her was because she's going to be pulling kids in all the classrooms that are struggling. And if there is improvement in those kids, the classroom teacher is going to take note of it. And I also felt like that was my best shot, because I didn't really want to mess with the veteran classroom teachers about trying something new. I'm the new guy. And so she said, sure, she tried out. When she tried it out, it wasn't long before I had 3 or 4 teachers in my office. Can we use ST Math in my class? I'm like, sure, I'll open it up for you. And then before I know it, like everybody wanted it. So we brought it in. So that was the approach. And I am not going to dictate to my professional teachers, you must do it this way. I didn't say you're going to give up one of your math blocks a week and just do ST Math. I know there are best practices for how to implement ST Math, and I use the consultants. And one of the ways that I build buy-in is connecting with consultants. We had really neat people that came from ST Math and even came and did mini lessons. They did things. So that's how it worked in the second building. The results, can I tell them the results now, Eric?
Sure.
Okay, the results, when we use a really cool term in Colorado called the median growth percentile. It kind of is built off of I'll give you a rough explanation. If I'm a 3rd grader and I score, say, a proficiency scale of 3, and my scale score is in this type of a range, the next year when I'm in 4th grade, they're going to put kids that scored similar to me in a group and then see how I did compared to peers that were like me in 3rd. And then that's my median growth percentile. When I arrived at Falcon Elementary School of Technology, there was a 28% median growth percentile for students of color. It angered me because the rest of the building was in the 40s. Why do we have a gap? Because of race. It doesn't make any logical sense to me. So I don't show my anger to my staff. I just look at systemic issues because they're trying their best. They're working their butts off. They are not intentionally trying to create a gap. But we didn't know much about professional learning communities. We needed to, one teacher said, we never had PD on math. We don't talk about math. We always do language. You're the first one who's ever come and talked about math. And I'm like, okay, fine. But we moved up in that first year by bringing in ST Math and doing these other strategies. We went from a 28 median growth percentile to the 70s, not just with children of color, but that 40% median growth percent went up to the 70s. The 28 went up to the 70. In fact, there were some grade levels where my children of color were like 2% higher than the general population. And I just feel like we solved the problem that our nation's been wrestling with for a long time. And we've done our job now. Kids can choose when they leave our school to do professions that have heavy mathematics because they're able to hit things that they weren't hitting before. All right, I will rest and let Eric jump in.
I think that's fantastic. The only question follow-up, and feel free, like I said, for those of you who have joined more recently, use the chat as a parking lot and we'll get to your questions. And then we have time at the end. So be thinking of questions, especially for Doc or for me. So what is the risk of this model that you see? Like you came in and you're like, I'm going to try with this one teacher. We're going to do organic growth. And then it's like, is that the answer? Is there
the risk is that if this one person turns the faucet off, I might have closed the opportunity for the whole school. That's the risk of the one person approach. But this was a really cool lady. So I thought any logical person is going to love this. No one, anyway.
Yeah. So it's something to think about, right? So he picked the right person and made it all happen. The organic growth is good, but we, as my experience over the years, even when we're dealing with schools and a district, often districts are like, well, I want to try it in this one school that's struggling, or this one school that has certain characteristics. I never like doing that type of pilot with a single school, because something can happen at a school. They could lose a principal, they could,
Yeah.
anything can happen. If you only have one example, it's just not a great, so I always like to have at least 2 or 3. So those are some lessons learned over the years. Okay, so let's move on briefly, because we are a little behind on time. So just maybe you want to talk about your current school, which I believe you call not rural, but frontier.
It's smaller than rural. It's frontier. Yeah. So we have one math teacher for 7th and 8th grade, and all we have is 7th and 8th grade. I have 4 teachers in my whole building, and it's me and a secretary. We are like the sheriff and deputy. We run the whole thing. So really, and this school, I never had a math performance this low in my career. They only 21% passed the state assessment, which I told the teacher, hey, next year, just tell them all guess C. We'll go up 4% on math on the test. But I didn't really say that, but that's what was in my mind. So there's a lot of issues going on, but I showed him this program and I said, we're going to try to use this with kids that are struggling. We use MAP assessments. I contacted ST Math. One of the neat things about this company is I can talk to them and they will figure out a way to do things. So I said, is there anything you can do with maps? And they say, yeah, we can figure out how to correlate ST Math with, and they're still working on it. It's not something I think they offer everybody yet, but we were a pilot for it. And so our kids were able to take the maps test, and then different puzzles were in queue now based on what the results were, which is really cool. This teacher loved it. And he integrated it, and we had so many middle schoolers are a different breed than elementary, so we had to come up with some different types of strategies to motivate them, bribe anyway. But we did it, and I feel like we were able to see far greater implementation than I thought we were going to. So this year, I don't know what our math results yet are on the state test. I'm hoping 21 we're going to beat that, but I don't know, because there are many factors involved. Like I said before, SC Math is one strategy. It's not a silver bullet. I have multiple things to do before we can feel good about our mathematics program, but that's that story. And I will rest because I want to mind the time so we can get to questions and answers.
Great. Thanks, Doc. So I will just say briefly, so thank you for being our beta test site for that. It is now starting next month that we call assessment integration, both with, you said the MAP, that's from NWEA. So MAP assessment integration, as well as the iReady assessment. We can pull in data for middle schools or elementary schools to inform the content that students are seeing. So that's, we're not going to go into detail about it now, but it's coming. So thank you. It's coming for everyone. Okay, so let's switch to takeaways. I don't see any questions. Maybe I'm missing them. I don't see any questions yet, but I'm sure they're coming. I'm going to share my screen again. And we're going to kind of try to distill some of this down. And I'll just make that full screen. All right. So as you're hearing, you have to, if you're asking people to really change what they're thinking about math or math education, this is not a lightweight lift. You really have to have a viewpoint of change management. So Doc is an expert at this in 3 very different situations. So let's kind of distill down. So one thing is expect resistance and frustration. And it's cool because he went through it himself, right? When it first was sort of pushed down on him, he was like, hey, like this, like I already teach math, like I'm already doing this and that and the other thing, leave me alone. So time constraints. I just want to chime in, this too much time on devices. So I put this in here because this is a COVID frustration, right? There are districts that are coming to us now and they're like, we're thinking about maybe cutting out all device time because kids are just on devices constantly. In the last 2 years, they've just been on Zoom. Okay, so I just want to remind for like people like me that have been doing this for almost 20 years, this has actually been a concern the entire time. So it's not about the minutes, it's at whether people say you can't learn math from a computer or, you know, whatever, the instructional value of an iPad is, you know, nothing, or whatever their resistance to technology is. I just want to put that this is not a new concern. The issue is, what are they doing on the device? It's always a tool. And so we're certainly not proposed that kids are on devices all day long, but the quality of what they're doing is what we're focused on. So let's just, you know, this is not something a passive situation. This is a different use of the technology. That's my little soapbox on that. Language, so that's another one. We need something that's language heavy. The tests are language heavy. And then also Doc brought this up, other shiny things. So that's a common, there's just new things that teachers want. And they're like, oh, what about this new thing? What about this new thing? So Doc, do you want to, are there any of these that you want to chime in a little more on? And
and change management, I feel like for me, I encourage diverse thought, and I want to hear when someone says, I don't think this is good for our kids because it's screen time. I want teachers to feel safe to be able to express these types of thoughts. The only way we can disarm a bomb or a potential barrier is if we see what wires are connecting and what people are thinking. So I want people to feel free. And then we dialogue. With that case where I had the one person trying it out, I was willing to not go with ST Math. If the staff came back and said, nope, even though I believed in it, I was willing to honor their voice, and it would have not gone on anymore. I did get another school to buy into it though, so maybe I would have transferred there. Just kidding, no. So diverse thoughts, okay. I think the way that the dialogue can work as a change management leader is to talk about, like I said earlier, the kids' view of what they're experiencing. And if we're teaching math the same way we learned it, or if we're teaching math in a traditional manner, and we're getting results like 21% passing, we need to validate that there is a need to change. If we validate that need to change, then we open up dialogue. Well, how can we try? What can we try to change? There are going to be lots of ideas. It's not just ST Math, but for me, the benefit to the kids is a big lever that you can use when you're helping a campus shift. And then also honoring people so that, hey, you're my professionals. Let's figure out what works with your teaching style, what's work with your time in your master calendar. How can I help you with that? Is there training we need? I care for my staff so that they can take this on as a soft transition. And then when they believe in it, I no longer have to pull anymore. They're pulling me. I'm making sure that there's anything on this.
So I moved us to the next slide, you know, creating a shared vision, because you started talking about like validating the need for improvement. So let me ask you this. Do you really sit down with your teachers and say, you're 21% or whatever, you know, this is where we're at and we need to change what we're doing, and how, you know, how is that received?
So at Falcon, when I first got there, I pull up data like we're a doctor looking at a blood result test or tests, and I don't look at it as you're a bad person because you have high cholesterol. No, I look at it like this is the results, and we can do better. You are awesome. I know that I see your hard work. You guys work late at night, spend your own money on supply. You're good teachers. So let's figure out what we can do together differently so that this changes. The first time I showed data in Falcon, people were crying in the audience. They did not like those. I mean, it felt like they're being beat up again by accountability systems. Now, don't get me into who's designing these systems. I don't like them, and I feel like they're based on fear. Okay, don't get me into that. But I do believe that we can beat these systems if we work together differently. And so the second year when I showed data, there were applause. Teachers, the same teachers that were crying a year before were actually clapping, and there was joy with data. And so I use data, and not in a non-threatening way, but in a way that shows us, okay, here's where we're at. Here's our current condition. We can change this. Let's do it.
Great. Thank you for sharing that. And it's obvious, I just put, because I've, in our talking and preparation for this, like that you invest the time and you actually care about your staff and you listen to them and you trust them, like you're talking about. You don't micromanage them. If they have a different system or they want to, so those are things that I think you've mentioned. Clarity of purpose and benefits, I think, is a key aspect of change management, meaning it's clear to everyone why we're doing this and what, like what we're going to get out of it. Like I'm asking you to change what you're doing or add something new. And so it's clear. And that's obvious the second year, like if maybe you have data by the second year. So this first year, is it just based on trust, or are you bringing in data like we, like I shared from Colorado Springs, or data from somewhere? Like, how are you demonstrating the benefits initially?
Some of it is just that we review our current state and we can identify there's a need. Like, I don't even have to tell them about another thing to bring in, because they can see what we have in place isn't working. And so now we're all looking together. And so I usually say, from experience, I've seen this do this, and I talk about the 28 and the 70, and I talk about things like that. And then I'll ask, would you be willing to try this? And when they do, I hate it. I've always had, the teachers that I ask, sometimes you get, if you have a staff of 70 people, there's going to maybe be a few that be like, I don't like it. I want to do Freckle instead. And so in my mind, I just try to connect with them. We're a team working together towards this goal. We all want our kids to be able to do things that right now they can't do. Scoring 21% is going to close many future career doors for kids. We don't want to be that kind of a production. We want to say, hey, what are your dreams? You can do them. We've prepared you. So I'll pause.
All right. So I put a few things, and this is our final slide. And maybe we don't need to talk through some of these. We already talked about giving autonomy over the implementation model. You mentioned briefly sharing week. The reports are looking like that water cooler talk where you're seeing who used it, who didn't use it, setting goals, whether it's a percentage goal or a puzzle goal, using testing time. That's something you've done. Partnering with us, so if you're not familiar with, we have resources to help schools and districts do family math nights. We actually are doing math weeks in many cases. Building GG culture, I wanted to add here because this ties directly to our why, and also what Twana was talking about this morning. Really, this is partially to fight math anxiety. Like this process has to be fun. And we even study, actually, does a game like this change students' self-beliefs? We have like an academic study on this, and it's published. We have blogs about it. But bringing the culture, meaning celebrations and making this process fun, is critical, because otherwise our math anxiety as a society is going to keep passing on to the students. So we have to intentionally counteract that. So puzzle talks, we haven't talked a lot about, but this is something that deepens. And maybe Doc, I know you've used puzzle talks in tier 1 front loading, maybe you want to say something quick about that. Yeah. There's 5 minutes left, so I want to make sure we get to open up for questions.
Is that 5 minutes including question time?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll make it real quick. Puzzle talks to me is a mini lesson, if you're familiar with like a lesson model. And we've had mind research helpers come in and model a puzzle talk with our teachers. It was really cool. So I think that works well. And also the front loading you'd mentioned, the teacher this year in 7th and 8th grade was using ST Math prior to his launch of, say, linear equations. And so kids would be doing ST Math, and then he would launch into linear equations. And one day he was walking by a student's desk, and she is kind of gothic, artistic drama, really great kid, but that unique kind of thing. But anyway, she looked up and she said to him, "Teacher, why is math getting easier?" And I was like, I almost cried, because I was thinking, yeah, when a kid says something like that, that's like a touchdown to me. That's like game over. When kids can say math is getting easier, when kids are finding that, she was taking a test when she was saying this. So anyway, that's how I will end my portion.
Nice. Thanks, Doc. We're going to wrap it up. We really appreciate all of your time and all of your efforts to help, on this mission. And this is, changing how people even think about math. It's a big ask. And, but it's the right thing to do for our kids. So on to the next session. And yeah, feel free to contact us on email or social media.